Welcome to the Cinematic Trail, an AI-generated deep dive conversation into the ever-evolving world of cinematography. From exposure theory to lens choices, from lighting philosophy to creative workflows, we explore the craft, the gear, and the stories behind the frame, one trail marker at a time. Want to take your cinematography to the next level? Explore our online courses and learn more at Cinematic.com. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly insights and inspiration. Let's begin the journey.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Let's dive right in.
Have you ever been there? On a shoot, meticulously setting your camera's white balance, dialing in what seems like the perfect Kelvin numbers, only to look back at your footage and see this odd, unexplainable tint.
Oh yeah, maybe a stubborn magenta.
Yeah.
Or even like a sickly green cast that just won't go away.
Exactly. And your first thought might be, okay, is this a camera bug? Something's wrong here. But as we're going to unpack today, it's actually far more complex and surprisingly common.
What's really interesting, I think, is that this isn't some rare glitch that happens once in a blue moon. It often comes down to a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of how our cameras interpret color, specifically white balance.
Right. We tend to think of white balance as just, set a Kelvin number, all done.
But there are these subtle yet really powerful forces at play behind the scenes, and they can silently kind of ruin your footage if you're not aware of what's actually happening under the hood.
Absolutely. So today we're taking a deep dive into this surprisingly nuanced world of camera white balance. Our mission is to really dig into the critical differences between preset and custom white balance modes, specifically focusing on how those tint values, the green magenta shifts, how they behave differently.
Yeah, and explore why just relying on that Kelvin number alone without grasping these underlying mechanics can completely sabotage your image consistency, especially, like you said, in multi-camera setups.
And we're drawing insights today from a really great learning moment that Chris from Cinematic shared. He talked about this real-world multi-camera shoot he did.
Right, where this whole issue just came glaringly to light.
Okay, so let's set the scene with Chris's mystery. Imagine you're on a shoot, you've got 3 nice cameras, maybe Sony FX3 and FX6 and FX9, good lineup, all in a perfectly controlled environment. The lighting is totally consistent across the board.
Okay.
So you do what anyone would do. You dial in the exact same Kelvin value on all 3. You expect them to match.
Right.
Perfectly.
Naturally, yeah. That's the goal.
But then you see it. One camera just has this strong pink tint. The others look spot on, neutral.
And it's not like a tiny difference either. He said it was glaringly obvious.
Glaringly obvious. What do you think the immediate reaction is, seeing something like that?
Well, my first thought would probably be, is this camera broken? Or maybe just, a slight difference between sensors, which that can happen.
Manufacturing tolerances exist.
Right. But what's really fascinating about Chris's experience and why we're talking about it is that this wasn't just a slight variation. It was a fundamental difference in how the cameras were interpreting that same Kelvin number.
Ah, okay.
And as he figured out, the culprit, the thing often overlooked, was the mode the camera was in, preset or custom white balance.
Which raises the big question, why would the exact same Kelvin number produce such wildly different results?
Exactly. It kind of challenges our basic assumption that a number is just a number. Input 5600K, get 5600K. But it's not always that simple.
It certainly isn't. Okay, so let's deconstruct the first mode then. Preset white balance. Most of us use this, right?
Yeah, it's very common.
When you set your white balance using presets on Sony's, like the FX series, or even your mirrorless or DSLR, you're usually scrolling through these pre-programmed Kelvin values.
Right, like 3200, 3300, 3400 Kelvin steps on the Sony's, or maybe selecting icons like clouds or a light bulb on other cameras.
It feels very simple, very direct, and that's maybe where the subtle trap lies.
It does feel straightforward.
Yeah.
And that's precisely the hidden truth, or maybe the hidden simplification, of preset mode. Each of those pre-programmed Kelvin values, it's locked to a specific internal combination of red, green, and blue gain levels.
Okay.
But, and this is crucial, it also includes a preset tint adjustment along that green-magenta axis we mentioned.
Ah, so tint is baked in already.
Baked right in. And the key thing is, you don't see it. You don't have the ability to manually adjust those individual RGB levels or that tint value in preset mode. The camera is basically making its own internal assumptions about what neutral white should look like for you at each specific Kelvin step.
Like a lookup table.
Exactly. Think of it as a fixed pre-calculated color recipe for each preset Kelvin value.
Which, okay, makes it incredibly convenient. Super fast. Chris even mentioned he'd gotten pretty casual about it.
Yeah, you step outside, quick dial to 5600K. Step inside, maybe dial to 3200K or whatever. It's easy.
So seamless that he'd often just guess the Kelvin, maybe not even pull out a white card, and he wouldn't always double check if he was in preset or custom.
Because both modes let you dial in a Kelvin number, right?
Right.
It looks the same on the surface.
Exactly. And this casual approach, as he found out the hard way, is exactly what can get you into serious trouble. It's a trap because it feels intuitive, but you're giving up a critical layer of control without maybe realizing it.
Right. And this is where the nuances of custom white balance come in. And honestly, here's where it gets really interesting and where the confusion often starts.
Okay.
So when you do a proper custom white balance, you hold up a white card under your light source, press the white balance set button. The camera does something very different.
It samples the light directly.
It samples the light, yes, and then it adjusts all the channels, red, green, blue, and the tint. It adjusts everything needed to make that white card look truly neutral under those specific lighting conditions.
Got it. That's generally seen as the gold standard, right? For accuracy.
Absolutely. It's the best way to calibrate for your exact shooting conditions, get pinpoint accuracy, and you can usually even go into the camera's menu and see those specific RGB and tint values it calculated. It's precise, it's calibrated.
Okay, so that's the proper way, using the cards, setting everything. But then there's this other way people use custom mode, the one that causes the headaches.
Right, the potential pitfall.
When you scroll the Kelvin value manually while you are in custom mode, what's actually happening then?
Here's the kicker. You are only adjusting the red and blue levels. That's it.
Only red and blue.
Just red and blue. The tint, that critical green magenta shift, it stays locked. It remains exactly whatever value was last set during a full custom white balance procedure using a white card.
Wow. Okay. So you're only adjusting part of the color equation. You're messing with the temperature, but not the tint.
Precisely. You're only getting half the picture, sometimes literally. And this is exactly what happened on Chris's multi-camera shoot.
Right. Explain that connection again.
So he had done a proper custom white balance for a previous project, probably used his own lighting kit, which maybe had a slight tint bias, who knows.
Yeah.
The camera calculated a specific tint value to compensate for those lights and stored it.
Okay, so that tint value is now saved in the custom white balance setting.
Exactly. Then, for the very next shoot, totally different location, completely different lights. He was still in custom mode, but instead of doing a new white card reading,
he just scrolled the Kelvin dial to match the new room's apparent temperature.
Bingo. He dialed in the new Kelvin value, thinking he was setting the white balance correctly for the new lights. But the camera was still applying the tint value from his previous lighting setup.
Which didn't match the new lights at all?
Not even close. That strong magenta cast on one camera, because the old tint compensation was completely wrong for the current lights. The camera was applying an old solution to a new problem, and it created that jarring, visible color shift.
And this really matters, because basically every light source has its own subtle, inherent tint bias, right? Some lean a bit green, some lean a bit magenta. Fluorescents are notorious for green spikes. Some LEDs can lean magenta.
Exactly. A proper custom white balance with a card compensates for that specific light's unique fingerprint, its bias. If you don't perform a new full custom white balance with a card when the lighting fundamentally changes,
the camera just slaps the old tint compensation onto the new light source.
and boom, that's where you get those unexpected, sometimes baffling color shifts we started talking about.
Okay, let's try an example. Say you custom white balance under some cheap fluorescent lights in an office. They often have a pretty strong green cast.
Right, so the camera compensates for that green by adding magenta in the tint setting to make your white card look neutral.
Okay, tint value now has a strong magenta push stored. Now, you pack up, go to a different location, maybe a studio with nice neutral LED panels, but you stay in custom mode and just dial the Kelvin knob to, say, 5000K because the LEDs are rated at that.
What happens? Your camera still thinks it needs to add all that magenta from the fluorescent compensation it stored earlier.
Even though the new LED lights don't need it at all.
Exactly. So your image under the neutral LEDs now looks heavily magenta shifted, even though you dialed in the correct 5000 Kelvin. Everything just looks wrong. The tint is off.
That makes sense. So it really begs the question then, why does the camera even let you scroll the Kelvin in custom mode if it's potentially so problematic? What's the intended use case?
That's a fair question. It's really designed for minor adjustments only. Think subtle tweaks.
After you've done the proper card reading.
Precisely. After you've done a proper custom white balance with a white card for the current lighting, you might want to subtly warm the image up a tiny bit or cool it down slightly just for a creative look.
Like fine-tuning.
Exactly, fine-tuning. You'll often notice that in custom mode, the Kelvin adjustment might change in smaller, more precise increments, maybe 10 or 20K steps, versus the larger 100K jumps you often see in preset mode.
Ah, okay.
It's truly meant for that delicate fine-tuning after a precise calibration. It's absolutely not meant for a full rebalancing of all the color channels when your lighting has changed significantly. That always requires the white card again to set the tint properly.
Wow. Okay, so what does this all mean for us, the shooters? Chris admitted, he felt a little bit silly realizing this only after so many years.
Yeah, 25 years.
It just goes to show how sometimes it takes a real-world mistake, maybe even an embarrassing one on set, to truly uncover what your camera has been doing silently all along.
Definitely. It's a powerful reminder that even the most experienced pros can have these aha moments. Discovering something fundamental about the tools they use every single day, it reveals that deeper level of mastery that only comes from really understanding these sort of hidden mechanics.
It's about turning that aha moment into, well, a strategic advantage on your next shoot, right?
Exactly. Now that we understand how these modes behave differently under the hood, the real question becomes, when do you strategically choose to use which mode to get the best results? It's not just about spinning a dial casually anymore.
Precisely. Okay, let's break that down. When should you primarily use preset white balance?
Okay, so preset mode is your friend when?
Yeah.
Well, when you need to move quickly between different lighting environments, like run-and-gun situations.
Makes sense. No time for cards.
Right. Or when you just want consistently neutral color without worrying about any leftover tint data from some previous setup messing things up. You want a clean slate each time.
Or if you literally don't have a white card, or just don't have the time for a full custom balance.
Yep. And it's also ideal when you're specifically trying to match the labeled color temperature of known light sources. Like your light says 5600K, you dial in 5600K and preset for daylight, or 3200K for tungsten.
So the main takeaway for preset is it's fast, it's reliable for getting you in the ballpark, and it's clean. Those Kelvin values are locked to the camera's internal color maps with a neutral tint assumption built in. No unintended color cast carries over from a previous setting.
Perfectly put. It's predictable. Now, custom white balance. When should you lean into that?
Okay, custom mode is where you go when. Maybe you're working in a tricky mixed light environment. Or using lights that you know have weird tint biases.
Yes, or when you need absolutely critical color accuracy. Think skin tones in an interview, or precise brand colors in product work, or narrative filmmaking. Things that have to be right.
And crucially, it's for situations where you actually have the time and the tools, like that essential white or gray card, to do a proper full calibration for the specific light you're under.
Right. The big caveat, the warning label for custom mode is absolutely vital, though. It is precise, it is powerful, but only when you use it properly. It must be paired with a white card reading, and you need to recalibrate it every single time the lighting changes significantly, if you skip that step.
That's when you introduce those unintended, potentially ugly tint shifts. It's the fastest way to get those weird color casts that just ruin your footage.
Exactly. And understanding this strategic choice, preset versus custom, it isn't just about getting the perfect shot in camera. It actually has pretty profound implications for your whole workflow, especially when you think about live production versus post-production.
Oh, good point. Explain that.
When you're shooting in log profile, destined for post-production, you generally have more flexibility. A small tint shift. Usually you can adjust that fairly easily in color grading.
Yeah, tweak the midtones, use a vector scope, push things around a bit. You've got wiggle room.
You have wiggle room, but live shoots, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, no second chances there.
None. If you're doing a live event, a broadcast, maybe a multicam switched feed,
Yeah.
your cameras need to match perfectly in real time if one camera looks even slightly off tint compared to the others.
Everyone watching sees it immediately. It sticks out like a sore thumb.
Absolutely. And this is precisely where relying on custom white balance, but without fully understanding how that tint value behaves, can really, really bite you. It stops being just about accuracy at that point.
It becomes about real-time consistency across multiple sources feeding into a live switcher. And trying to fix a bad tint match on the fly there. Forget it.
It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible. So, yeah, critical for life.
Okay, so let's try and simplify this. A clear rule of thumb.
Yeah.
For fast, clean setups where you're maybe not deeply customizing each lighting condition from scratch.
Use preset mode. It's ideal for live events, quick turnarounds, run and gun, jumping between locations without breaking your flow, because each Kelvin setting in preset basically gives you a clean slate, tint-wise.
Got it. And then for situations where absolute accuracy is paramount and you have full control over the lighting environment and the time.
Then use custom mode.
Ah,
But, and we can't stress this enough, it should always be paired with a white card reading. Recalibrate every single time the lighting changes, even subtly, to capture that specific light's unique color fingerprint, including its tint.
okay. So the key takeaway, really boiling it down. If you're working in custom mode and you want accurate, consistent results.
Always do a proper white balance with a white card first. That sets everything. Red, green, blue, and the tint for those specific conditions.
Then, if you need to tweak it slightly warmer or cooler for creative reasons,
Scrolling a few Kelvin steps up or down is perfectly fine. That's what it's for. But do not rely on scrolling that Kelvin dial alone as your primary way of setting white balance in custom mode, especially when moving between different lighting setups or shoots.
right. And conversely, if you're just trying to match a light that's labeled, say, 5600K, or you need to make a fast change without risking introducing some weird leftover tint from a previous setting.
Then just use preset mode. Scroll to 5600K. It will be cleaner, faster, and almost certainly more neutral because there's no potentially incorrect leftover tint data involved from a past calibration.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how the exact same Kelvin number, say 5000K, can behave in two fundamentally different ways depending entirely on whether you're in preset or custom mode.
It really highlights the power and I guess the importance of truly knowing your tools inside and out, understanding their often hidden depths and assumptions.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden features or maybe default behaviors are lurking in the everyday tools we rely on? Things that might be silently impacting our work for better or worse.
Definitely. And how could taking a deeper dive into their true mechanics, like we did today with white balance, save us from future headaches? And maybe even unlock new levels of mastery we didn't realize were possible.
Something to mull over, for sure, until our next deep dive.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for the great conversation.
Yeah, really great insights today. Thanks for tuning in and spending some time with us.
Thank you for joining us on the Cinematic Trail. We hope today's journey sparked new ideas and sharpened your eye behind the lens. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and as always, happy filming.